Hi there, my name is Marley and today I'm going to be doing my November wrap up. In November I read 9 books, so I'm going to tell you a bit about all of them, what I rated them, and as always I'm going to do it in the order of the worst to the best. Also, sorry if the lighting is not great. I wanted to film in this different location, but I think it is not the best lighting, so sorry about that. But you can see some of my Christmas decorations. So starting it off with a 2-star read. The worst book that I read this month, and actually the one that I've been reading over the last few months, was Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. This chunker, it is nearly 1,000 pages. So I think I started it in September and I finished it, like it was the last book I read in November. So if you guys are not aware, this is the final book in the Throne of Glass series. It is the 7th book, and this series follows this girl who is an assassin. There's also a lot of fae involved, like fairies, and I don't really want to spoil too much, but the reason I gave this such a low rating is mostly due to the fact that it is so long. I just found it to be completely unnecessary. Like, I get it if it was full of really great content that was all needed, but for a lot of the books in this series I just felt like a lot of it wasn't needed. There's a lot of descriptions, especially dealing with a lot of the battles and wars going on in this book, that I just think were too much and not needed. There are also so many character point of views in this series, and that has just been growing with each book, and there were new additions to this book even, and it's the final one, and I just feel like that's really unnecessary as well, because there are some very strong characters. For me, my favorites to read about have been Dorian and Manon, and I even enjoy Kale and Irene, and I kind of like Alide as well. I used to like Aelin, but started to dislike her, and then a lot of the male fairies I really just don't care for, especially Aedion. I think that's how you say his name. Ever since he joined this series, I really started disliking the books, and I realized it was because of him. I really dislike him and his character, and whenever it was his chapter, it was super boring, where I was just tuning out. It really sucks because a character I like, which is Lysandra, is his love interest, but even she cannot save his chapters in the book. So those are some huge problems that I had in the last book. I also feel like things wrapped up a little too nicely and things were a little too convenient for a finale. So I'm so grateful that I finally finished this series. I started it last year and it's just been a goal to finish it. So really glad I finally did. Wouldn't really recommend this series personally. I enjoyed the first couple books, but I don't think it's really even worth it to read those. But I'm excited to read the rest of Sarah J. Maas's books. I did read A Court of Thorns and Roses this year, which I gave 5 stars. So I have a lot more hope for her other series. Another book I read this month was the Bromance book club by Lyssa K. Adams. And this was actually my personal book club with my friends. We haven't had our meeting quite yet, so maybe after that I would have had better thoughts, but I'll just go with what I can remember. Basically, I'm giving this 3 stars, but looking back, I'm should it have gotten even lower? Maybe, but I don't think I hated it enough for that. I even hate saying hated it. I think it was rough at the beginning, but it got better. Anyways, this is about a book club of men who read romance novels to impress their wives or their significant others. They basically get advice from romance novels, which sounds like such a cute concept. That's why I wanted to read this. That's why I suggested it to my book club, and I was really excited to see how they did this premise. But I was definitely disappointed in it. So basically, our main character is named Gavin, and he is a professional baseball player, and he is having some issues with his wife Thea. They have only been married for a few years and they have these twin girls, and that was basically the reason they got married, is because she got knocked up. So it's no wonder they're having marital issues and relationship issues. I was just okay, obviously this is gonna need a lot of work. They didn't even have a foundation before they got together. But anyways, so then his friend from his baseball team is hey, come join this bromance book club that I have. And basically there was a book club that was already established, full of all these men in the sports industry or something. And basically it was all of them have already gone through this, and all of them have already used the romance books to help with their relationships, and they were bringing him in and going to help him. So that was one of my issues with it. I wish, as the first book in what I know is a series, I wish the first book would have been literally the establishment of this book club, like seeing this group of friends, even if it was the baseball team, seeing them decide to create this book club and experimenting with it and figuring out that they wanted to do this idea. I didn't really like that it was this guy being dragged into this pre-established club. It also makes me wonder, is the rest of the series going to be new relationships, or is it going to be those characters but like prequels where we see what they already went through? Like, I don't know. I just didn't like that aspect. I also just wasn't huge on like the writing. I found a lot of the characters unlikable, especially at the beginning, as like some of my friends were saying in my book club, like there wasn't a lot of description being made to a lot of the characters and they were just not really likable. The second half I actually did like more, which is a little surprising because it got spicier, as you know most adult romances do. They have some spice in there, which I'm not normally a big fan of, but I actually did prefer that half. And like, as you can imagine, like the half that focused more on the good parts of the relationship and them like coming back together. So I did end up giving it a 3, but I wouldn't really recommend this, and I'm undecided on if I will continue the series. I might have to hear from some other people on if it gets better or something like that. If you've read it, definitely let me know in the comments if I should continue or not. These are some lengthy reviews already, sorry. So the next one I want to talk about is Meet Me in London by Georgie Toffolo, and I gave this one 3 stars as well. I read this for a certain reason in my life. Like I kind of squeezed it in to my TBR. I didn't originally plan to read it, but it is a kind of typical Christmas romance, holiday romance. So it's following these 2 characters who I do not remember their names anymore. The guy is kind of like this rich business guy, and the girl, I want to say she's like a struggling artist or something, but I might be forgetting. But anyways, they meet and I think they end up dating. This is a fake dating story. Frick, I read it very quickly and I can barely remember. So that shows like how little it stuck with me. This was a very like average read, hence the like 3-star rating. I just felt like the author was trying to go for those trendy tropes of like not really hate to love, but like a little bit, and then like the fake dating obviously, which is so popular and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm not really getting sold on this. Again, the characters are nothing special, the story was nothing special, so just very like average. Like I wouldn't really pick it up. But are there any good holiday romances? Like I've read a few and I feel like they all are just like very average. Now the rest of my reading month was pretty good. So next up we have Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World by Benjamin Alire Saenz. And I actually filmed a whole reading vlog for this. It was spoilery. It's on my channel if you want to see it. As for my non-spoilery thoughts. So this is the sequel to Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, which was one of my top favorite books that I read last year. So I was very excited to get to this sequel. However, I will say it was definitely not really needed. Like, I'll even admit that. I think other fans will admit that as well. It was just kind of nice to see these characters again, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. So I definitely didn't like it as much as the first one. I still liked the beautiful writing, and I still enjoyed the characters, but I just think one of the things is that it's like YA contemporary, and that's not really my thing anymore. But anyways, it follows Aristotle and Dante, who are these two teenage boys in the 80s, and they are both coming to terms with their sexuality, their identity, and kind of all those kind of typical teenage things that they're going through. But a big focus is on their sexuality, especially in this second book, and their relationship. It deals with first love, it deals with racism, like a lot of, you know, key topics like that. But a lot of this book did feel like a little aimless, and I do wish there was more of a focus on the relationship between the 2 boys. I don't know, it was still an enjoyable read, and I definitely recommend it if you've already read the first one, but I don't think it's necessarily a have to read. Next up, I did a little sci-fi reading vlog, which you can check it on my channel. I'll link it. And one of the books I read for that vlog was Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is the first book in a YA sci-fi series that was popular a few years ago, but people still talk about it like it's one of those classic beloved series. So this takes place in, you know, a futuristic like dystopian sci-fi world, if you're into that. And we're following this kid named Darrow. He's a teenager and he's working on Mars, which is where this takes place. And he's kind of like the lower class in Mars. He's forced to work and kind of like be a slave kind of thing. And then he ends up getting wrapped up in what I would like to call the resistance in the world, the people who are trying to take down the government or whatever. So he gets wrapped up in that, and he ends up going undercover to this school. I think they call it the Institute, and they want him to basically do really well in the Institute, get high up in this society so that he can take them down from within. So it's actually very fun once you get past like the initial few chapters that are really just focused on like setting up the world and everything. Once he's at that institute, it really has a lot of those like fun school or like boarding school dynamics, a lot of that competition stuff that was popular in the Hunger Games and Divergent that is always fun to read about. There's some pretty interesting characters in here and a lot of like action, especially towards the end. I do feel like it started to get like too actiony, like too much descriptions of the fighting once again, but still overall really great, and I gave it 4 stars, and I'm excited to keep reading the rest of the series. In that vlog, I also read Cinder by Marissa Meyer. This is a Cinderella retelling, and it again is a very popular YA fantasy sci-fi series that most people have probably read already. But this is about Cinderella, but if she were a cyborg in, again, this like futuristic setting. She is just kind of working for her step family while there is this like plague going on. So also kind of relatable to our current day with the pandemic. But her sister ends up getting the flu or whatever, so she kind of gets wrapped up into that. She is also trying to like get enough money to like escape from her family because they mistreat her. Obviously, there is a Prince Kai who is very likable, very cute, and it very much has like the chosen one story or story arc. I feel like I'm struggling to explain this a little bit, but I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars as well. I liked that even though it was a Cinderella retelling, it didn't stick too close to the Cinderella story, because sometimes, like, as much as I love retellings, like that can get a little old when you know everything that's gonna happen, which is a slight twist on it. I feel like they did do a lot more twists from the Cinderella story that still kept it very fresh and interesting. Oh, another thing, so it's called the Lunar Chronicles, this series, because there are these people called Lunars who live up in space, like on the moon, and they are kind of like seen as being evil, and they have magic, and there's like an evil queen that is kind of trying to take over Earth. So that's another element. But I really enjoyed this. If you haven't got to it yet, I really recommend. It is a YA classic for a reason. And again, I look forward to reading the rest of the series and seeing the rest of the princesses that it features. Next up, we have As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. This is one of my most anticipated books of the year, and because of that, I also filmed a spoiler reading vlog that's up on my channel if you have read it and want to see all my in-depth thoughts and reactions. But basically, this is the 3rd and final book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, which I have been loving, and I gave all books 5 out of 5 stars. So we're following this girl named Pip, and she is a teenager. In the first book, she is solving this mystery in her town where this girl was killed and then her boyfriend was blamed, but Pip doesn't think the boyfriend really did it. So she takes on this case and ends up finding out who the real murderer is, and she creates like a podcast about it and becomes really well known because of that. And it's a really great mystery, and Pip is a great main character. I love how she is so involved in the mysteries and like cares so much about solving them, whereas a lot of protagonists are just kind of getting dragged into it. She is like really committing. There's also a very cute romance in this as well. The second book is also so good. I think just as good as the first one. And then finally this third one. As I already said, I also gave it 5 stars, but it really takes a turn. Like, the fact that this cover is black really fits because this is the darkest one of them all. It gets a little bit different. Pip isn't really investigating a murder outside of herself. It's kind of one that involves her more, as she does seem to be getting stalked by someone, and it could be, you know, someone she wronged in a previous book, that kind of thing. It really takes a turn like halfway through. It went to very unexpected places for me, which I still have a little bit of mixed feelings about. I don't know if I love the direction it went or if I agree with everything that happened, but at the end of the day, I still enjoyed it so much. It brings out so much emotion in me, this series. So definitely recommend the entire series, including this one. 5 out of 5. Now for the 8th book, I read The One by John Mars. This is another 5-star read for me. It was so good. This is a sci-fi thriller book. So once again, this takes place in a semi like futuristic world where they have developed this technology that basically tells you who your soulmate is, or like who the one is, right? So we're following like all these different characters. I want to say there's like 6 of them or 5 or something like that. We're seeing all their different experiences with this app. One of them is a serial killer, which there's some obvious intrigue with that, like who got matched with this serial killer and what is he gonna do. There's a bunch of other ones, and each chapter is super quick, so it does take you a little while to get used to like each of the characters and what's happening, but once you do, it's so entertaining. You're dying to get to each person's chapter because it like always leaves off on some sort of cliffhanger. There's like plot twists throughout that are all super interesting. It's just such a fast-paced, amazing book. Like probably one of my favorites of the year. There's a reason people talk about it so much. It's so good. And I think that's all I'll say about it, but definitely read it. Then for the last book, and probably my favorite book, although that could just be because I read it more recently, so it's sticking with me, but that was Lyssa Jewell's The Night She Disappeared. It's beautiful, it's stunning, and so is the inside. So what is this about? It is about a teenage girl and her boyfriend who go missing one day, and her mom is left wondering why, as they were actually teen parents who were like very responsible, taking care of their son, probably planning to get married. So it's very strange that they would just run off. So in this book, we are following 3 different point of views, and they all take place at a different time as well, which at first I found a little bit confusing, but again, you wrap your head around it. The first one is we're following Tallulah, which is the teenage mother, and we're seeing like kind of what led up to the night that she disappeared. Then we are seeing the mother named Kim and sort of her immediate reaction after the night that her daughter disappears, and you know, wondering where she went, getting involved with the police and everything like that to try and figure out what happened. And then we have, I think it's like 1 year later, we're following this other girl who is this mystery novelist that is new to the town and just sort of gets wrapped up in this mystery when she sees this message in her backyard that says dig here and an arrow, and she digs it up and ends up finding some evidence that relates to this case. So it's like, why is she getting dragged into it, you know? But she is also just like our narrator in like the present day as they, you know, put all the clues together and figure out what happened to this couple. This is such a good book. Like, I always praise Lyssa Jewell, but I feel like sometimes her books are missing a little bit of something, and that's like the twistiness. Like a lot of times it's very obvious what's going to happen. Like in one of her books called Then She Was Gone, which is one of my favorites. But this one, I feel like the twists were actually better. So it had like a good twist, but then it also had all the other elements of Lyssa Jewell that I love, which is just creating such interesting characters. Like, this is a thriller, but it made me cry because I was so invested in this family, like Tallulah and Kim and like the son. Like, I was just so invested in it and so like emotionally affected. But then it also had all those things you love in a thriller where you're wondering what's going on. There's like dangerous people, mostly dangerous men, the mystery and the twists. Like, I think this is my favorite Lyssa Jewell book I have read so far, which is really great because it's her newest release. So this kind of just shows that she is continuing to get like better and better as an author. So I really recommend this. Maybe even if you didn't like some of her previous work, you would like this one because I just don't see how you couldn't. It's really, really good. So that's my favorite book of the month and one of my favorites of the year. 5 out of 5 stars, obviously. But yeah, definitely recommend if you're a fan of like mother-daughter stuff as well. So those are the 9 books I read this year. Oh, I should also mention that this officially marks 100 books that I've read this year, which is really, really cool. It's the most I've ever read in a year before, and I'm really proud of that. We still have 1 other month, so I'll probably reach like 110 at least. So thank you guys for watching. Definitely let me know what you thought of these books or what you were interested to learn about them that I mentioned, and then make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I reached 300 subscribers, so yay, thank you guys. I'll see you in my next video. Hope you have a great time celebrating the holidays. Bye.